When I was 5 years old, there were no party planners, there were no decorators. Cake भी बाहर से नहीं आता था. You were lucky if you got a store-bought cake. The birthday party scene has become a production. I remember when I saw my hospital bill, I think it was 3x of what I expected.
Wow.
Suddenly we have to take care of the kid, right? It's our responsibility.
Your savings are at stake even before your child is born.
I found out that Crocs for kids sell at 2,000-3,000 rupees.
Yeah.
So I refused to buy them. We were a less privileged generation. So one of the good things we got was not money, but a lot of hunger.
Right.
And I still want my child to have hunger.
Hi, today we are absolutely delighted to have with us Radhika Gupta, who is the MD and CEO of Edelweiss Mutual Fund. And she's, on top of that, a mother of a 2-year-old. So we couldn't have asked for a more perfect guest. Radhika, if I may call you that.
Absolutely.
As Indians, one of the most universal phenomena after wedding is the expectation of the good news.
Oh, yeah.
And, the unsolicited advice of friends and dear ones and relatives. For me, I remember distinctly, I had just come upon Fame and Money right after my wedding, and I wanted to postpone it for a while and have a baby slightly later. So we postponed it for 5 years. In that period, the amount of advice we got and the amount of... My mother actually started going to the temples and started praying, assuming that there was something wrong. But you even beat me to it from what I hear. So would you want to tell us about how that period was in your life?
So it's actually quite similar. I got married at 24, which is super early in our world. And I turned entrepreneur at a very young age. Life is a struggle. You're actually not super financially secure, wasn't taking a salary, living in a very tiny place in Mumbai. We had just moved back. And we decided that we just wanted to wait till we were a lot more stable, not just financially, but in terms of time and mental bandwidth. And then we tried to conceive about 8 years later. I actually had multiple miscarriages, Madhavan. And finally, we had a kid 15 years later. So you said 5, I am 15. And you can imagine not only all the parental and that network advice that comes, but there's also a lot of peer pressure because, we went to college and all of us, husbands, wives, we all married each other. I know it sounds terribly incestuous.
No. Same case with us. So I totally understand.
Everyone else had kids 10 years before us.
Right.
And those kids were like, everyone's lives changed. They were all chilling with their kids, vacationing. So you felt a little off from that circle. So there's so much pressure on this topic. It's actually quite sad because I think it is a very individual decision.
I can't agree more with you. Absolutely. And, it's unwarranted pressure. I think as parents, we know what we're doing, and when the child...
We have to take care of the kid, right? It's our responsibility.
One can understand the eagerness of the grandparents, but the other day I was reading about how everyone loves to talk about how cute it'll be, but no one wants to talk about how expensive it is to raise a child. And as much as we hate to make that association, a child is a financial decision. Did you ever have a conversation around this with your partner before you had your child?
We did, and I think that's one of the thoughts, not consciously but subconsciously. I mean, my husband and I, we always chatted and we said, we want to be stable financially and otherwise before having a child. We wanted the child to be born into, our son to be born into his own home. And these were things that we managed to do. It's not, there is a generation that says, we were younger, we had child and children grow up regardless of what you give them. But, subconsciously, there's always a desire to give your child more than you got, for the child not to go through some of the struggles that you had. So, of course, and, the world has changed. I mean, I keep joking that when I was 5 years old, my son just had a birthday party, Madhavan. When I was 5 years old, there were no party planners, there were no decorators. Cake bhi bahar se nahi aata tha. You were lucky if you got a store-bought cake. The birthday party scene has become a production. And I know it sounds very trivial, but it's just an example of how everything has gone up.
Exactly. And see, you're in the financial industry, so it's but evident that you would plan things in advance for your child and how it is. But for people who are not connected with the financial industry, for instance, the average middle-class Indian, for him, it's like, ab paida kar liya hai, to pal bhi jayenge, But I think the whole process of this interview is to make sure that we give them a little bit of insight into what it is to plan for their children. As expert financial advisors, if you're planning for it, then it makes even more sense that as people not involved in this line,
Mm.
we plan financially for the sake of the child. So we're going to try and see what that advice is going to be. For instance, the other day I was reading about how India is one of the leading markets for IVF. I remember the numbers to be in billions of dollars, which was quite shocking to me, actually. What do you think is happening?
Well, I think one of the things I told you about my multiple miscarriages, but scientifically, fertility has come down through the generations. And this is something, and in India, it's still a tad bit of a taboo to talk about things like miscarriage, to talk about things like infertility, things like IVF. But the reality is, fertility has come down. And more women are needing to have to adopt for fertility kind of care, whether it is IVF or whatever it is, some kind of help. These things are absolutely not cheap. And I always think that in the planning process, one should have open conversations about these things. I was told that even small cities in India have hundreds of IVF
Oh,
clinics.
absolutely.
And they must have, if there are clinics, there must be demand for this stuff, right? So planning starts from when you conceive the child to the recurring expenses of the child to, at some point, I'm sure we'll talk about marriages and education. Let's not even go there.
Yeah, I think for the metropolitan families, marriage and education is not as much a stress in the beginning.
Yeah.
But if you look at the lower and the smaller centers, and the moment a girl child is born, the first concern the parent has more than the education is iski shadi ke liye kya kare, bachana shuru kare, and it's a tradition, and it's it's
Yes.
difficult to get rid of that attitude. But I think it's far more important to educate the child
Yeah.
and hope that they are able to take care of themselves, as opposed to you being the backbone of their marriage in terms of your financial savings. But nevertheless, it's an Indian practice. It's such a catch-22 situation. Having a child earlier means upsetting your career, while waiting until you're in your mid-30s can bring fertility challenges and the high cost of procedures like the IVF. In fact, I recently saw an ad for IVF financing. The cost goes into lakhs, I'm told.
Yeah, I think IVF cost goes into lakhs. Even if you're not choosing to get an IVF, sometimes people underestimate that in the process of a natural pregnancy, Madhavan, you could be hospitalized for 2 months.
Correct.
I'm, my mother had that, but hospitalization per day cost in itself has gone up. Some people have natural pregnancy, some people have cesareans. I had a cesarean, by the way. Cesarean operation costs are much higher than natural,
Right,
costs.
plus the recovery stays longer at the hospital.
Plus your recovery stays longer, and there's a lot you have to do. In fact, I remember when I saw my hospital bill, I think it was 3x of what I expected it to be.
Wow.
And we're fortunate it wasn't such a big deal. We had some amount of insurance, but it was a surprise.
And see, I think this is what people don't prepare for. The cost of, a cesarean as opposed to a normal childbirth.
Yeah.
The fact that you might have to stay in the hospital for longer than before. And suddenly, the whole process of the childbirth itself and bringing the child home, instead of being a happy, joyous occasion, turns out to be extremely challenging. And I think that's very, very important for people to understand that it is a huge responsibility. I mean, we'll be coming in, like Radhika said, to situations where birthday parties and, the child feeling not underprivileged because of, a certain practice in the society also are going to add up to your costs. But in the very beginning, you need to have enough amount of money to make this into a pleasant experience. So you need to be prepared for it. And this is what people don't realize. Your savings are at stake even before your child is born. A monumental expense I'm seeing now is also school fees, college fees, education fees. Some of my friends' kids go to international schools, and I think their kids in LKG are paying more fees than I did for my entire engineering, which is actually a fact.
Many more times.
Many more times, I'm saying, multiple times, yes. And somehow it is something that you can't not do, like you said, provide them with a level playing field with the rest of the people around the world. So how do you prepare for something like that, and when do you start preparing for their education?
So I think what you need to do after conceiving is you need to build, I don't like to use the word business plan, but a bit of a life plan, that what are your recurring expenses of having a child in the first primary years, in the 5 to 10 phase, and then in the 10 to 18 phase. Like in the 0 to 5 phase, I can tell you childcare for working women is extremely expensive.
Right.
And education is not as expensive. Once you move into the 5 to 10 phase, education starts becoming expensive, especially international schools. Once you move into the 10 plus phase, the child is probably going to have classes on top of that. Tuitions, for people who take tuitions. I have a cousin who's taking tuitions. I looked at his tuition bill. I was shocked.
Yeah.
Extra classes. Kids these days are not just studying, they're doing extracurricular activities, they're training. If you're doing any kind of sports training, I'm sure you'd know this with your son.
Yeah.
This stuff becomes expensive. You need to actually have an every 5-year plan and calibrate expenses.
What I found really exciting or appropriate about this is the fact that it's actually divided into three categories,
Yeah.
where you have the initial 5 years. And I think it's really, really important what Radhika said is because we don't actually make allowances for that in first 5 years. You might not be spending money for the education or for school, but you're definitely spending it on childcare. And by that, I mean, maybe you're abroad and your parents are flying over to take care of your child while you go to work, or you're in the city here and you need
Help.
help. You need to have nannies or you need to have relatives come and stay while you get to work because you don't have long maternity leave. So under those circumstances, categorizing them into these three categories, I think is very, very smart. And I think we far underestimate the costs that are involved in the first 5 years, apart from the medicines and the doctor bills and going to the
Everything is
hospital, everything.
expensive. You start categorizing vaccines. I mean, my husband is a little bit of a finance nerd, so he makes spreadsheets to categorize every expense in our life. But it's vaccination bills, it's doctors, it's entertainment, it's all of that stuff. Sometimes people travel and they need help to come with them. So all
Absolutely.
kinds of stuff
I
adds
know
up.
of people who spent a fortune on the first birthday.
Oh
It is
God.
such a big deal. Almost, I think I didn't spend as much on my marriage as they did on their first on the first birthday of a child, and I'm sure. I mean, God bless them, having the money to do that. But I'm just saying, it's all these events, and it's not just for the child. The child probably doesn't even
The
realize.
child doesn't care.
It doesn't give a rat's ass, but as they say, but
I had to buy my son a first pair of shoes, and this is going to make me sound really cheap, but I'll still say it. I found out that Crocs for kids sell at 2,000-3,000 rupees.
yeah.
So I refused to buy them. I was like, I cannot do it in me. I finally found a fake version of Crocs. But you can't spend 2,000 rupees on something that's going to be outdated in 2 months.
Let me tell you something else. I know a lot of parents who are so conscious about the fact that they have to give return gifts that they sometimes avoid going to the birthday party because they can't afford it. They're like, "Arey, wo aayenge, abli bar apni birthday ke liye bulana padega," and they say, the child is busy or unwell or, we have to travel to some place. Because it's really such a responsibility to keep track of what they gave you as a return gift and then what you have to give it
My
back.
husband writes it down.
I'm just saying, that is a responsibility. Can you believe it?
Yeah.
And I would have nothing to do with it. And but
You're
I
lucky
think
you have an older kid. The birthday parties, I can manage 1.5 lakh crores of assets, but I just did a birthday party and I promise you it is very stressful.
I am sure it is. I'm a living testimony of that. I was reading the other day about how birthday parties today have wedding budgets, and we think that these things don't matter, but they all add up to the cost of bringing up a child.
Yeah.
For Vedant, for instance, he was into swimming and getting him. So my wife would not allow a driver to drive him at 4 in the morning because she says, I can't vouch for what he was doing the night before and when he's gone to sleep. So I don't want to put my child's life at risk. So she would get up in the morning at 4 and drive.
That's commitment.
Yeah, well, she was. And she is. She still does it. But the thing is, because of that, we had to have 2 drivers.
Yeah.
One to bring the child back from school and then make sure that he goes to a swimming pool and the costs that we didn't.
We just got a second driver. Me and my husband managed with one for many years.
Yeah.
We got half a person in the house.
Yeah.
We got another driver.
There you go. So, things that you don't expect will add, to your monthly bills, right?
It's classes. Like summer comes and you need these guys to be entertained. They don't have school.
Oh.
So I sent him to summer camp.
Very, very important. And I think, that's a topic that's really close to my heart because I think academics per se is not enough for the child.
Yeah.
In today's world of AI and survival, it's really, really important that the child has an all-round development. Not enough is taught in schools, For instance, we were talking about it the other day with the MD. Like, I wish people taught in schools and colleges what it is to invest in your insurance of, lifetime insurance, medical insurance, when you should get into it, because there are costs that you don't calculate, right?
Yeah, I mean, personal finance, this has been my rant for years, Madhavan, that personal finance is as much of a life skill as public speaking or math, right?
Right, absolutely.
But nobody teaches it.
No, and it needs to be. And I think I'm bringing that in because I'm saying, like this, there are many other life skills that need to be taught that cannot be involved
Yeah.
included in the school academics, right? So what you're saying about summer school and the various hobbies and activities that I think are mandatory for survival
Yeah.
today involve a certain amount of budget that you have to make allowances for. Do you think parents are becoming more competitive than kids these days, trying to keep up with that trend, whether it's exams or extracurriculars or all the extras?
So I went to an Ivy League college, and my husband
Wow.
manages admissions. He also did. So
Right.
he gets to see this very up close, and we hear these stories. It's crazy. I think, look, my husband says I'm a tiger mom, so let me first not cast judgment, but I think there is a lot of pressure. I am on these mommy WhatsApp groups, which people like
Oh,
you
yeah.
and Nalin are very lucky to escape, but they can make you feel very bad about yourself, because there was a mommy on a group saying, I need a Spanish teacher for my 18-month-old.
No way.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and they're planning these summer camps, and I'm a super busy working woman, so I don't do all this. I just copy what other mommies do. But one day I went to my mom and I was like, I'm a bad mother, because they're doing all this stuff, this right brain development. I mean, and he's 2 years old. So, and when you go towards college, the amount of stress that parents are taking on today, it's a tad bit unwarranted, right?
Well,
Placement's
I'm
not going to decide whether you go into Harvard. I think maybe it does. I don't know.
well, hoping that a large part does. My son is in college right now,
Ah, there you go. So you've
so
got through that.
yeah, it's the hard part of leaving the child there.
Yeah.
He's definitely had a privileged, growing up because of the fact that we could afford
Uh-huh.
a lot of things that he wanted without having to, cut corners. But when you go to college and you have to start taking care of yourself,
Yeah.
those expenses
Oh,
were a
that's
shock
nuts.
to us as well.
Yeah, yeah.
We keep thinking, oh, this is much, and we can afford. But suddenly things come out, and you suddenly go, oh, I didn't think about that,
Huh.
and I didn't think about this, and I didn't think about that. And he's a swimmer, so there's a whole new expense related to his
Related to.
swimming activities. His physiotherapy,
Huh.
his psychologist. Things that you don't start accommodating for when you
Yeah, yeah.
budget things.
As I said, I went to college overseas on financial aid. So the college paid for the financial aid, but just buying books
Right.
is very expensive. I mean, everything is very, very expensive.
Yeah.
So,
So I think we're just coming back to the fact that you need to plan a little bit.
yeah.
There's always a way of saying कि मालिक संभालेगा, which
Huh.
is also there, and there's a saying in Hindi कि जितनी चादर उतनी पसारो.
Hmm.
But there's a lot of intelligence and smartness and planning, which is what we're heading for. You know that your kids observe everything. They know when the people around them have much better things, and they are very sensitive to it. When all your friends come in sedans, but you're being dropped off in a scooty, it's not something you're going to easily forget. And in this digital age, when social media and whatnot, their mental health can really go for a toss. How does one explain this gap to your child, and how do you ground the child in situations like this?
Oh, Madhavan, it's something I think about all the time, because our son is so young. My husband and I keep talking. And, we don't want him to feel an inferiority complex, but we think instilling gratitude in the child is extremely
Oh, yes.
important. So when we did a birthday party, it's not that we didn't do a birthday party, but we did one at home, kind of low key, and I always say in life there is a bit of a middle path, right?
Correct.
You don't give the child nothing, because that is another set of problems, but you don't overdo it. And you constantly teach the child to say thank you. Like, Nalin, my husband's a Catholic, and I think they have this lovely practice, and actually most religions have it, called grace before
Correct.
food.
Correct.
Just saying thank you for things,
Mm.
right, is extremely important. I also think that, like, as a 2-year-old, you get my son anything. You get him a keychain and he gets excited about it.
Right.
He doesn't know, is it a fancy branded one, or is it a cheap one, or is it like a, substitute fake? They don't know labels, and they don't know all of that. So I think just role modeling the behavior is extremely important. By the way, in his first 6 months, we gave him a lot of his old cousin's clothes to wear, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. So I think having a sense of priorities And finding the middle path is very important. Teach your child about the middle path. You're also not going to instill hunger in them. We were a less privileged generation. So one of the good things we got was not money, but a lot of hunger.
Right.
And I still want my child to have hunger. And
So one thing that I cannot agree more with you in terms of, one of the most important skills for the child to have is the attitude of gratitude, like you mentioned. Okay, and I think I fortunately, although we came from very middle class background, I was able to afford everything that Vedant wanted because of the kind of success God bestowed upon me. But I also realized that it came from its with its own set of challenges. When you're looking at that and you see the other kids living let us say, a luxurious life, which God's grace, they're all able to afford. I realized that two things I need to tell Vedant, and one is this attitude of gratitude, which is very, very important for them to know that they are privileged, but that somebody else has worked, their backsides off to get you this. And therefore, sometimes just telling him the salary of my cook,
oh, that's a nice one.
and saying, hey, you know what this toy of yours that you've been gifted to costs? This man has to work an entire year living in that kitchen to afford a bit of that. And so that struck Vedant a lot. He's like, oh, really? Yeah. The second thing I made sure that Vedant did was to acknowledge, maybe not as much of my friends, but most certainly acknowledge the lift man, the guards, the drivers, and not call them like ayahs and stuff like that. Call them didis and make sure that if the watchman came and said, you're a very polite child, he always says namaste to me, I thought my job was well done.
I do that with Remy. He says namaste. And he knows with older people, whether it's a liftman guard, you say namaste, you say hi. I think it goes a long way.
It's not just about good manners. I'm just trying to say it's about the situational awareness that keeps your child aware and present of who and where he is and who he is dealing with.
And just to treat people who don't have as much money normally.
Exactly.
It's not about...
I can't tell you how many times, Radhika, that has come in good stead, and help when I really needed it. It's these people who are really concerned. They know who the boy is because he's a far more polite guy than the rest of the people. He gets noticed because of those kind of things, and it helps to get noticed in today's world. The other thing is that you sometimes you have friends who have special needs, and some of the things that we keep brushing under the carpet is the financial planning that is required for children with these challenges. Autism, for instance, or dyslexia aren't as rare as we think, and disabilities often mean a lifetime of care. No one expects this, but can you share a few tips on how parents of special needs and kids should reassess their financial plan for their special need child?
So this one's actually very close to my heart because I have multiple folks in the family who have special needs. And, today awareness about autism, kids being on the spectrum is a lot higher, but 10, 15 years ago it wasn't.
Right.
And I think there are two parts to planning when you have a child with special needs. One is the recurring expenses. Now, very often they go to a normal school, but you want to enroll them in special classes.
Correct.
Sometimes they go to special kinds of schools that are a lot more expensive. After 18, you normally plan, and it depends on, with autism, I mean, kids can be at multiple points in the spectrum. So it really depends on your individual situation. But after 18, you may want to enroll them in vocational training if they're not going to do traditional careers. So that's a cost. So there's one which is recurring expenses, Madhavan, again in the 0 to 20 kind of phase. The second and much more important thing is how do you plan for the rest of their life if they're not income earning. And, very often you'll end up having to create a corpus and create a formal trust structure or financial structures so that they can get an income to lead a dignified life for a long time. And that is a lot of planning that you have to start thinking about.
And this is different from having than for a normal child, you're saying?
At a normal child, at 22, 23, the child starts becoming independent.
Correct.
And you don't have to plan for the rest of their life. At maximum, your responsibility is till 25.
Correct.
Here, your responsibility could be till the child is 40 or 50.
Absolutely.
And I've seen this in my own house.
Very, very valid point. Yeah, absolutely. And I think for that, the planning has to happen at a much earlier stage. When would you suggest is the right time to create such a corpus?
Sooner rather than later. I think once you are able to assess how independent the child will be at 18. And I think that decision, you'll probably get a sense at 10, 12 years old. I mean, there's enough help out there.
Yeah.
Then you need to start planning for how long you're responsible for the child. It's a very different financial thinking.
But and a very, very important one, and you have
And
to.
you'll need to get professionals involved to take care of that money
Eh,
once the parents are gone.
Oh, yeah. That I think, yeah. Therefore, the Corpus Fund and
And
their
you don't, because you don't
foundations.
want that money misused.
Correct. Well, that must be a
It's
huge
tough.
challenge. Yeah,
It's
it's
tough.
tough. Wow. Let's talk about the cost of childcare.
Yeah.
So many couples go from double income households to single income households to take care or better care of their child. How should couples approach this decision? You're going to lose a source of income. So, what would you plan for, and how would you actually accommodate for this?
So one fact is, I think India is getting increasingly nuclear. In the past generations, we didn't have to think as much about childcare because there was always a parental ecosystem
Right.
at home. Now, as more of us are seeking work in cities that, like we live in a nuclear family, and sometimes parents will come to chime in, but even then, there's a travel cost. But you do need childcare. Now, childcare comes in all forms, but I can tell you it isn't cheap. I think the decision on whether to have the second income, in this case it's often the woman who drops out of the workforce, is a very individual one. The law says that women can take 6 months of paid maternity leave, so that's an option most women have, but I think it is a very, very personal one. The important thing, as you said, is to think about the planning. So is the woman going to continue at work, in which case maternity leave, and you retain the double income. If you're not, then I think it is a major financial choice. I always tell women who sometimes feel guilty, this is a bit of a detour about going back to work, that know that you're also working to provide your child a better life, because a
Right.
double income household is also just that. It's double the
Exactly.
income for the
I was
child.
just going to come to that. Yeah. So the planning of the double income household also should be on similar lines. Am I right?
Yeah, the planning
Yeah.
of the double income household is, so you're going to work, you're doing it to give your child a better future, and childcare is an inevitable cost. So when I had my son, and childcare costs are not small for us, some people in the family said, "Oh, why does she have such expensive childcare?" So I heard those things. Hamare zamane mein to it wasn't there.
Correct.
I said, this is the cost of being a CEO.
Yeah. Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is just the cost of everything
Absolutely.
I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I said, I am not going to put myself through suffering. When there is help, please go out and take help. In fact, the best advice I received was from a very senior lawyer who said, Radhika, take all the help you can in your maternity journey and do it without feeling guilty.
Absolutely. In fact, I had the privilege of studying abroad in a Western country, and I lived in a town in Canada, which was pretty wild for those times. It was teenage pregnancy was a rampant pit over there, and drugs and alcohol was part of that town. And I found one family that I stayed with. Their children absolutely normal as can be.
Yeah.
Very well brought up, not into any of these issues. And so I happened to ask the lady of the household many years later. I said, "How did you manage to do this?" And she gave me an advice which I followed through the heart, and it really worked for my son. And she said, "Don't give your child free time."
Ah, nice.
He said, indulge him or her in whatever they want to do, as long as they're doing it with passion. The interests will change, their, the level of commitment will change, but make sure that they don't have free time till they're 15, 16 years old. Make it a habit to make sure they go from one activity to the
The
other.
other.
And it could be fun. It should be fun.
It should be
It
fun.
shouldn't be a chore. So the child is going to hate it. But if he wants to play basketball and tennis and golf and wants to play kabaddi and spend time with the servant kids and learn how to make dough, whatever, just make sure that it's how his times are filled. That doesn't give them time to dwell in things that they shouldn't be at that age.
Yeah, we've also kept screen time off our son, which is, I guess when Vedant was growing up, it was probably less of an issue. It's a big issue
It was
now.
always a challenge. I don't know. I don't know how much you can keep them out of it. But
as long as you can.
As long as you can. But I think the physical development of the child is far more important.
Yeah, getting them out there, sending them, like we used to go down to play in our times.
Yeah.
We send them down to play.
Let me just put it in a line that I heard, which drilled it into my head, We used to fall asleep.
Yeah.
As children. Today, the children have to go to sleep.
Sleep.
You're supposed to turn off the light, turn out the camera, bore them to go to sleep.
Do some
It's not
event.
right.
Yeah.
The child should be so exhausted
Exhausted.
that he should fall asleep. And if you're doing that, then you're doing something right, which is why the amount of activities is important. Like I was saying, everyone knows that they have to save for their child's future. And at some level, we're all ready for it and we start researching. But Google throws up so many options today that we immediately get overwhelmed. I'm going to ask you to rank the top 5 investments that constantly show up in Google researches for investment for children, which is PPF, gold, Sukanya Smriddhi scheme, mutual funds, SIP, child plan, or 2-in-1 plans, insurance plus investment.
Okay, so
Your thoughts on that?
firstly, the disclaimer, I'm the CEO of a mutual fund. And so you know what my answer will be, but I promise I'm telling you an unbiased
As a mother.
I'm giving you an answer as a mother, not a mutual fund CEO. So I would rank mutual fund SIP as 1, probably gold as 2, PPF, Sukanya Samriddhi at 3 and 4. And Sukanya Samriddhi, I think, is applicable only to girl child.
Right.
Because they are finally just interest-bearing investments. And the last one, which is your childcare plans, etc., as the last on the list. And my simple reason for the ranking is that when you're planning for your child, Madhavan, you have time. And time means that you can take risk. So you want your money to be in the most wealth-creating asset class.
Correct.
In that case, that is an equity mutual fund. And SIP is a very good way to do that planning.
Well, I think that's very sound advice, something that people really need to understand and
that's what we do for our kids.
Yeah, that's what you do for a living. So I'm sure it comes from a great amount of experience. A few months ago, I was chatting with Varun, ACKtually's founder, and about life insurance, and he had a very strong opinion about endowment plans. I remember he told me that these plans neither give investment returns nor insurance coverage. What are your thoughts on this?
What do I say that Varun hasn't said? I don't like the mixing of investment and insurance. Most people think that the plans give insurance for the child. As I understand, they give insurance for the adult.
Right.
And I think just separate it, right? Do investments cleanly via your mutual funds and, do SIPs into mutual funds. And if the parents need insurance, please buy it separately. And generally, one piece of financial wisdom that has always worked for me is don't lock your money into anything you can't take it out from until absolutely necessary and critical and you're getting the world to do it.
Right. That's very sound advice.
Don't lock your money up.
Yeah. What surprises me is that if these plans are only okay, how are they constantly showing up in the top 5 searches when I do that on Google? I see ads for them all the time. When you have a child, relationship managers are the fastest to congratulate you and they immediately try to sell one of these plans, and you're in somewhat of a vulnerable state then. I want to know, how do you know if an investment is right, and how can you tell you're being manipulated?
So first, if you're being rushed into anything, you are being manipulated. And if you are ever being rushed into anything, I always say no investment opportunity is worth running for.
Right.
If you're ever being rushed, just say no. Nothing is a freebie or a deal or an opportunity. These things don't happen. So that's
because the time period is so long.
Long, yeah. So if you're being rushed to lock your money into so if you're being rushed, it's a problem. If you're locking your money in, it's very often a problem. And if it sounds opaque and complicated, it's a problem. If you can't understand it, then don't do it.
That's exactly what I'm saying. If it's sounding opaque and complicated, it is, which means it's not right.
It's deeply problematic. So don't do it.
Yeah, the fact that you possess the intelligence to know that you need to do it will give you enough intelligence also to understand what you're investing into, right?
You are smart.
You're smart.
So don't underestimate yourself.
Yeah, so if people are making it sound like it's way beyond what you can understand, but it's good for you, then,
don't do it.
Yeah. There's a lovely saying, right? If things sound too good to be true, it probably is.
They are. And if they're too complicated for you to understand, then don't bother.
Yeah, don't bother. Because, more often than not, it'll come around to bite you. At the end of the day, all parents more or less have the same goals for their kids. A good education with arts and sports, a big fat Indian wedding, and an overall happy life with regular indulgences. The only difference, perhaps, is the amount they can save. What are the 2-3 investments that every parent must ensure the savings plan that they make includes for their kids?
So I think genuinely start a long-term systematic investment plan for your kids. We started one for our son Remy when he was 4 months
Oh,
old.
really?
Yeah, and because he has time, we said we'll plan for his education, which is overseas education. That is going to be very expensive. It's
Yeah,
going to be mad
yeah,
expensive.
yeah.
So we just we back calculated that amount and we put that money into an SIP. You can plan for anything, but I'm saying start an equity investment for your kid. When they get older, start exposing them to that investment so that they learn about money. It's a great way to teach kids personal finance, I think. I think that is all that you need to do. If you're planning to educate your child abroad, you might want to think about investments in foreign currency,
Right.
because you will need that foreign currency.
But how do they do that when you're living in India?
So while living in India, there are financial products that let you invest in the US market so that you can benefit from whatever is happening in the dollar. So there are, mutual funds that offer US dollar exposure. So you can do things like
You
that
can do that.
if,
Okay.
if you so have the need. I mean, not everybody has the need. So I think that's really all that you need to do. Make sure your kids' paperwork is in order, bank account, all of that is in order. And I genuinely think the best investment you make in your children is the non-financial one, and that is time.
Oh, very well put, Radhika.
Yeah,
That
I
is
don't
so
think there's a
true.
better investment.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you. I think one thing is the financial stability and
Yeah,
planning. The other thing is the overall development of the
yeah,
child,
yeah.
and then making sure that it's a wholesome, good life that they lead. And I think time is an essential investment in term. I just want to say that I found your answers to be really precise, concise, as well as effective. It's a rare quality, Radhika. So it's been a great pleasure talking to you. Thank you for leading us to the intricacies of financial planning for a child. I'm sure parents to be found this incredibly useful, and hopefully will spend more time thinking about it. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, and lovely talking to you.
Thank you. And thank you for teaching me about parenting from someone who's a little ahead in the
Slightly
journey.
ahead of you.
I had fun learning that.
Yeah, well, the pleasure's been entirely mine.
Thank you.
Thank you.